take off this injector pump on a 7.3 IDI inside of a 1988 Ford van E250. Basically, I've already removed the air cleaner and a few brackets that hold the air cleaner in place. Also, I took the throttle linkage and draped it down over there, get it out of the way. I want to get as much stuff out of the way as I can. I've been able to take this thing out with the injector lines attached. They just have to be loosened. It's a bit of a hassle, but it's not totally impossible. And then you bring it through the front. But because I got the thermostat housing in and that heater hose, or not heater hose, the radiator hose, I won't be able to pull it through the front with the injector lines attached. So I'm gonna do this in a way that basically will undo all of the injector lines and have them ready for the new injector pump, and then it's a bit of a tricky thing. But anyway, here we go. First thing is I need to get in here and undo that inlet. Now if you don't have one of these, you gotta get one. This is sold by R&D, IDI Performance, and it gets rid of that metal line that leaks. It's such a pain. This is a much nicer solution to it, so you can put a regular fuel line on there. I highly recommend this, guy. So I'm gonna take that off first, then I'm gonna loosen all of the lines here, because it's a lot easier to loosen it with the IP still bolted on. And then after that, I'm going to, I don't know if you can see it from here. Yeah, you can't see it. Oh yeah, you can. You can kind of see one of the nuts right there in the back, and there's two more around it. And also I got to undo the 5/16 inch 12-point bolts that are in the gear housing as well. So I'm just going through and finishing up undoing all these injector lines. So that one's off of there. Alright, off the IP, you gotta take off the vacuum lines. It's better to undo them. Also back there, and then run this up for the front, so I'll do that. And then take off all the little connectors for the fuel shutoff, and timing advance, all this stuff. Take all the electrical guys off. Alright, that guy's out of the way for now. Disconnect this. I'll get a this is the return. Get a screwdriver, take him off. And I already started to undo some of the front guys up here, so they're done. I'm gonna try to get in there and get the second lowest ones as well, but the bottom two are pretty much impossible to get. So when I lift this thing up, I'm gonna go in there and undo those last two on the bottom. On the front here is that cover. You take off these two bolts, and under there is three 5/16 inch 12-point bolts in there, and then also the mounting. Let's see if I can get a shot of it. These guys, there's one, and then there's another one back down there, and then there's another one on the other side. I already loosened that one up from the other side. Alright, let's see if we can get this off. And there are the 12-point bolts. Got the injector pump bolts and nuts off. And I got almost all of these guys off. I dropped one of the nuts down at the back. So basically now this thing is wiggling in here, and I still can't, if I can move it, you can kind of see the injector pump moves. So it's basically ready to come out, but I can't get the bottom ones out, so I'm going to undo some of these retainers. I don't want to take them all the way off, but I just want to loosen them up enough so that I get a little more movement with my injector lines. Alright, I basically pulled this thing out of the gear housing and just kind of hoisted it up in the air. That gives me enough room to get those bottom two injector lines and finally get this apart. I finally got it apart. I can just pull it out the front now and take a look at it. Came out pretty easy. Just pulled it right through here. And here we are. This is the old pump. And I need to swap some things over. This guy, and this is for the C6 vacuum regulator valve, and this is for the 4OD, which I don't have, so I'm gonna move this one over. And got that inlet I was talking about. I need to move that over. It's crucial that the orientation of this vacuum regulator valve is the exact same on the new pump. So I'm going to try to make sure that I get this thing as close to where these are located in these slots, because it won't shift right if you don't have it lined up right. Well, kind of a silver lining to having a grimy engine is you can kind of see that's where the old spot was, and that's where the old spot was, so this should line up pretty easily. Hopefully it'll go okay. Well, while I was working on this thing, I found a problem. This doesn't have that plunger coming out right here, whereas in the old one you can kind of see it has it resists it. There's a spring in there, so I'll have to use my other spare pump. Alright, I got another IP. Here's the old one, and then here's the other one. This one came off a 6.9. Really don't like to use it. It's really tired, but I don't really have any other options. And this one actually works in the bottom here. And you can see the C6 vacuum regulator is a slightly oriented differently than the one that came off the 7.3. So I'm going to adjust this thing to match this as close as possible. Swap over the inlet from R&D. The IP back in, and then the two hardest ones are on the bottom here. And I got them threaded on. Now what you have to do is sort of lay the injector pump in the spot where it's supposed to be, and then try to tighten those two down in the right orientation, because if you try to tighten them down now and then the orientation of the injector lines isn't exactly right, then you're going to have some problems when you're trying to time it, because it'll keep pulling to whatever side it's stuck on. The injector pump has this little notch in here. You gotta align that with the stud on the gear. So down here, there's that stud. It's on the other side as well, and you just gotta line that up. You can pull this pump inward. It'll wiggle in. When putting these nuts on that hold the injector pump on, don't jam the injector pump all the way on beforehand, because the studs are too long and you can't get the nut around it. So before you suck it tight, leave a little bit of a gap, and then you can get the nuts on. It's kind of a hassle. Thread on these guys. Got to make sure that that stud is lined up. If it's not spinning easily, then you didn't get the stud lined up. You got to pull the IP off and do it all over again. I got all the lines tightened down. Next thing is I got to put this guy back on that engine. If you loosened up your little retainers, make sure to tighten those back down. You have to have these, otherwise you'll cause your injector lines to fail over time through metal fatigue. And if you don't already know, I did a little upgrade to these things. If you got access to a welder, that's great, but if you go to the website, I'll put a link here. I use JB Weld to hold the nuts underneath, so you can get in there and easily tighten them down without having to try to hold it in place. It's a real hassle when you have to put your finger underneath there. So, you know, with that holding the nut underneath, it just tightens up. And then next you got to put the return hose back on. You need to put the vacuum line back on top of the vacuum regulator, connect all the electrodes. The Right here's the fuel solenoid shut off. I'm gonna put the intake hat back on without all of the air filter and everything, and try to get it started with that, because more than likely when this sort of thing happens, when you have an empty IP, you gotta purge the air out of the injector lines, and it's kind of a hassle in the van if you got all that stuff in the way. So let's see how it goes.